Look at your last paycheck. Whatever the number is, just think about where that concept came from. The idea that your time has a fixed value, that someone owes you something specific for showing up and doing a job. We treat it like it's always existed, like wages are just a fact of life, as natural as eating or sleeping. They're not. Someone invented them, and the first record of it happening wasn't in medieval Europe, wasn't in ancient Rome, wasn't even in ancient Greece. It was in a city called Uruk in what is now Iraq roughly 5,000 years ago. And the currency they used was something you probably had last weekend. Beer. Not gold, not silver, not even grain alone. Beer. And when you understand exactly why, it's going to change how you think about work, money, and the people who figured all of this out from scratch. By 3000 BC, Uruk was one of the largest cities on Earth. Somewhere between 50,000 and 80,000 people lived inside its walls. Think about what that actually means. 50,000 people who cannot all grow their own food, who need potters, metalworkers, weavers, construction laborers, scribes, temple administrators, specialists. And the moment you have specialists, you have a problem that has never gone away since. How do you pay someone who makes pots for a living? They can't eat the pots. They can't wear the pots. They need food. But they're not farming. So who gives them food, and in exchange for what and how much, and how does anyone keep track? The answer most people give is barter. You made something, I grew something, we traded. Simple. The problem is that almost certainly never worked at scale. Anthropologists have spent decades looking for societies that actually ran on systematic barter before money existed. They couldn't find them. What they found in every documented case was something different. Something more organized, rations, administered, recorded, institutionally managed daily allocations of food and drink. Not trading between individuals, distribution from a central institution to workers in its service. And in Uruk, that institution was the temple, and the primary unit of payment was barley and beer. We know this because they wrote it down. A clay tablet sitting in the British Museum right now, one of the oldest written documents ever found anywhere on Earth, shows exactly two symbols: a human head eating from a bowl, a conical vessel, ration, beer. Scratched around it are records of how much each worker was owed. It is technically the world's oldest payslip. The standard daily ration for a worker in Uruk was approximately 1 to 2 liters of beer plus bread. Not as a treat, not as a bonus at the end of a hard week, as the core unit of compensation in one of the most administratively sophisticated economies the ancient world had produced. The beer itself was nothing like what you'd find today. It was thick, cloudy, low in alcohol, nutritious enough to count as a meal on its own. Workers drank it through long straws to filter out the floating grain sediment. In a world without clean water, without refrigeration, without any way to safely store liquid at scale, beer was safer than water, calorie-dense enough to fuel hard physical labor, and stable enough to be produced, stored, and distributed centrally. It wasn't just payment, it was infrastructure. And the system was more complex than it looks. Workers in Mesopotamia weren't all paid the same. The tablets, and there are tens of thousands of them from this period, record a detailed hierarchy of rations based on role, age, and gender. Scribes, who managed the administrative system itself, received more. They were fed by the institution at a higher level than the laborers they oversaw. Skilled craftsmen, metalworkers, weavers, potters received a middle allocation. General laborers at the bottom received the base ration, and female workers received roughly half the allocation of male workers doing equivalent labor. Not hidden, not informal, written down, administered, built into the system from the beginning. The earliest recorded gender pay gap in human history is sitting in a clay tablet in a museum, filed, documented, deliberate. But here's the part that almost no one covers. The invention of writing itself, humanity's single most transformative technology, may have emerged not to record religion, not to preserve history, not to write poetry or law. It emerged to track beer. The earliest tablets from Uruk, dating to around 3400 to 3300 BC, are almost purely numerical and pictographic. They show quantities of grain, heads of cattle, jars of beer. They aren't telling stories. They aren't recording kings or gods. They are administrative documents, ration lists, payroll records, the accounting tool of a Bronze Age HR department. It was only later, centuries later, that the same system expanded into language, into sentences, into literature. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories ever written, the story of a king searching for the secret of immortality, it was written in the same script, on the same type of clay tablet that started as a beer ledger. Humanity's greatest invention was born from a payroll problem. Now here is where it gets uncomfortable, because the workers at the bottom of this system had almost no ability to negotiate their ration. The temple set the rate, the scribe recorded it, the worker received it. There was no mechanism for pushing back, no process for disagreement, except one: you could stop working. And around 1170 BC, not in Mesopotamia this time, but in Egypt, near the very end of the Bronze Age, a group of workers did exactly that. These were the artisans of Deir el-Medina, a village built specifically to house the men who carved and decorated the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. These weren't unskilled laborers, they were specialists. Painters, sculptors, stonecutters, paid in grain rations by the state, housed by the state, fed by the state, entirely dependent on the state delivering what it owed them. And then the grain stopped arriving. Not once, repeatedly, month after month during the reign of Ramesses III, the deliveries were late. Then later. Then didn't come at all. The Egyptian administration was fracturing under the strain of wars with the Sea Peoples, failing harvests, and a collapsing economy. But the workers at Deir el-Medina didn't know any of that. They just knew they hadn't been paid. After 18 days without rations, they put down their tools. They walked out of the necropolis, the tomb complex, crossed the wall, and sat down in front of the funerary temples. They were not rioting. They were not destroying anything. They sat down, and they refused to move. A scribe named Amenemhat recorded what happened. His account survives. The workers' words survive. Written in hieratic script on a papyrus now preserved in the Egyptian Museum in Turin. Their message to the officials was direct. We have reached this point because of hunger and thirst. There is no clothing, no ointments, no fish, no vegetables. Right to the pharaoh. The officials tried to get them to go back. The workers refused. They marched to the office of the vizier, second in command only to the pharaoh. And they made their demand. They wanted what they were owed. The vizier authorized an emergency release of grain from the temple stores. The workers went back. 5,000 years before a union existed, workers organized, made demands, and won. It didn't last. The payments were late again within months. The strikes continued, off and on, for years. The records show a system that was slowly breaking down, not just at Deir el-Medina, but across Egypt and across the entire Bronze Age world. By around 1200 BC, within a few decades, almost every major Bronze Age civilization collapsed. The Hittites, Mycenaean Greece, the Ugaritic kingdoms of Syria. Egypt survived, but shrank dramatically. The trade networks that had connected them all for centuries simply stopped. The causes are still debated. Climate, drought, the Sea Peoples, internal rebellions. Possibly all of it at once. And when the dust settled, the administrative systems that had managed those ration payments, the temples, the scribes, the clay tablets, most of them were gone. The knowledge of how to write cuneiform script disappeared for centuries in some regions. The payroll system that had run without interruption for over 2,000 years, the system that had accidentally invented writing, vanished along with the civilizations that built it. Go back to that paycheck. The number on it sits at the end of a chain that runs 5,000 years long. Through clay tablets and beer rations and barley allocations managed by temple scribes, through a woman at Deir el-Medina whose husband hadn't been paid in 18 days, whose children were hungry, and who stood outside a temple wall waiting for someone in authority to do the right thing. The concept of being compensated for your time isn't obvious. It isn't natural. It was invented, argued over, systematically administered, and occasionally fought over by people who lived and died millennia before the word economics existed. They built cities with it. They built tombs with it. They accidentally built the entire concept of written language with it. And when the system failed them, they stopped. They sat down, They said, "We have reached this point because of hunger and thirst, and they did not move until someone listened." That's also ancient.